I guess it's been really gratifying to like learn more about Judaism, because I feel like the more I learn, the more I kind of like find pieces of it that like really align with my values and like my outlook on the world. Hello, my name is Mackenzie. This is a video essay for my Jewish conversion at the New Village Temple. Hi, Rabbi Diana. So as a reminder, my project is kind of centered on the morning prayer, Ailu Devarim. So yeah, I'll read the prayer right now, and then I'll get into how I've been, I guess, incorporating it into my day-to-day, and just like how it's kind of like shaped my thinking and the like reflection that it spurred. So the prayer goes, or the English translation of the prayer is, "These are the things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all." So something that I wanted to do with this prayer was kind of like basically establish like a practice and like keep myself accountable to that practice, which is where this video essay comes in. But to establish a practice of reciting it daily and like reminding myself of the values that it teaches. So initially I was thinking like this would be like a week-long thing, and I would kind of like go through the prayer each day and like try to find like additional sources. I found like one kind of long one in particular that like breaks down each like action that's like broken down throughout the prayer. And then I got sick, and the thing about me getting sick this year for the last like year is that I have gotten like really sick every time. So it kind of like threw me off for a couple weeks, honestly. But it was kind of nice to pause and come back to it, because like I kind of like that it spread it out a little bit, and I'm like having to be reminded of these things. And I guess it also kind of demonstrates the importance of religious prayer, so to speak, because it's like you just forget some of the things that you kind of take away from these kind of study sessions. I did want to kind of like launch into some of the things that I learned from the readings, because they were actually really helpful. And the reading that you had sent me, like the resource from Sefaria, was kind of like a little Kickstarter, but then I was interested in like breaking down the other parts of the prayer. So this article was How to Pray for Happiness by Rabbi Evan Movik. And what I really liked about this writing was kind of stepping back and looking at like the prayer as like a whole, and just how this rabbi like kind of highlighted how the prayer, like especially like reciting it like daily, is just constantly reminding you to kind of like look outside of yourself. And his argument here is that like the means to happiness is kind of like not being so insular and like looking outside of yourself to like your community, to your loved ones, looking after them, just like doing good deeds, like all that stuff is kind of like a means for happiness, which I thought was interesting. But in particular, I really liked this notion that like kind of like the daily recital of this prayer and like the values that it encourages and like reminds you of are values that really emphasize the importance of like looking at and like serving your community. So the first one I focused on was honoring father and mother, which is kind of convenient because I feel like it's something I'd been thinking about more recently anyway. I think this like kind of relates back to kind of being at this time in my life when it's like, okay, things are finally settled. It's like I've got the job that I'd wanted to get, or like the career is steady, the bills are payable. I've got like a partner, I've got like kind of established friend groups. I'm just kind of in this like, I don't know if I'd call it quiet, but I guess like more stable moment before kind of the next big transition or change. And I think it's just kind of like prompted a lot more reflection, and I think that reflection has kind of like prompted me to think of like my parents and maybe my future, and like how much I see them, how much I'd like to see them. They live in California, and obviously I live in New York. But with the additional reading, it kind of expanded my idea of like how to think of this commandment, to not just like my parents who raised me, but like the other people who were like an important part of my upbringing and like shaping who I have like become. Even like giving them that thought, and like hopefully that can be like the little nugget that kind of like springs action and like closer relationships. That it's like if I'm thinking about, you know, the people who helped raise me every day, then like I'm that much more likely to like reach out to them and like remind them that I'm thinking of them, because I am. And just like kind of keeping others in mind, because you know, it's just so easy to get so caught up in my own day-to-day. So I thought that the bit of the prayer that kind of relates to I guess like focusing outward in a similar way to like honoring one's father and mother is engaging in deeds of compassion. And I kind of liked thinking about that as like kind of a daily value to remind yourself of. I like that it kind of forces you to like focus on the world around you. It's like not being so insular and like thinking about your own problems, because I think that can be kind of like a toxic headspace to be in. But just like taking a moment to like think about what someone else is going through, or just like literally what they might need, like the door open for them if their arms are full of bags, like stuff like that. And I think it just kind of goes back to what I was saying about, I really like that so much of this prayer kind of reminds you to like focus outside of yourself. I think the prayer as a whole to me kind of reads as this like reminder to like go out there and like make the world a better place. And like not only that, but I like that like some of the affiliated readings kind of like remind you that it like pursuit in life is like how to be happy, right? It's like to cater to and like serve and protect your community. I was actually reminded of this value the other day. I went to see the play The Sign and Sidney Brustein's Window. It's by Lorraine Hansberry. I won't divulge too much because you should totally see it because it was amazing. But I thought I was really kind of struggling halfway through the play. I was like, I feel like I'm not getting it. I'm not quite sure like what the theme is here. It's like, what lesson is she trying to get me to take away? Or like, what standpoint is she advocating for? What standpoint is she just like portraying that I'm supposed to glean from this? Because you had all these different characters with their like kind of like radical politics and their like impassioned beliefs about, you know, the world, their community, how to serve the community, how the community should be oriented, like all these things. And I think it was like very purposefully kind of pointing out the ways in which like those kind of like different takes on like the same kind of radicalism could really clash. Not only like when the individuals were like interacting with each other, but even in like the individual's like relationship to their beliefs. One day they believed their radicalism was like right and just and like possible and like had hope, and the next day they didn't. And something that ended up, I think, being really important, at least from my understanding of the play, was like they kept talking about hope. Like Sidney Brustein in particular was kind of at the beginning of the play very like nihilistic about like his hope for the future, and I think he kind of used that nihilism as a means to like reject the, I guess, like need for action. But I thought at the end, like my takeaway was that in claiming that hope was the thing that you needed to have to like advocate for and like work towards progress, they were being self-defeatist, or they were just kind of missing the point. And it was almost as if they were kind of making progress more about themselves than about the world around them. And I thought that the way the play ended, albeit very dark, I think the point was that progress is not something you work towards because it feels good for you. It's like progress is something that you work for because the alternative is like continued suffering of other people. So there's just like no choice. So I guess like my takeaway was it's like not about our hope. It's about necessity. It'd be interesting to kind of think through this prayer and like kind of some of the things I like read about it with Max, my partner. So I think you'll catch that in the next clip. Hi, Max.
Hi, Cameron.
Max is going to do a little interview and discussion with me about this morning prayer. Max, would you care to say anything about who you are and your background with Judaism?
My name is Max. I'm Mackenzie's fiance. I am born and raised in a Jewish household, somewhat secular. Definitely didn't go to synagogue every day, but comfortable with Judaism and with prayer.
Wonderful. So that's Max.
That is me.
Okay, I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with you about some of the thoughts I had about this prayer, because I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things in this prayer especially. Okay, so my first question was going to be, what about the prayer jumped out at you most? What were your initial reactions?
I think the last line is the most interesting line, that they list all of the mitzvos. The caring for mourning the dead and respecting your parents and prayer, and then it says the study of Torah encompasses them all, which is interesting. It's a little bit of a difficult line, don't you think?
So the reading that Rabbi Dan actually recommended for this prayer was the one that kind of focuses the most on the line about studying. The gist was that studying leads to the action. So that's why it's given such an important spot in the prayer.
That's definitely how I read it as well. It's to say, if the Torah is in your heart, that you will do these good deeds. That you don't need to think about caring for the sick or remembering to pray if you are learned in Torah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, I'm just curious to know how you react to some of the reflections I had on the prayer. The most, I would say, impactful of which was this concept of the morning prayer being a happiness prayer, and how its emphasis on community and turning your focus outward, away from yourself, away from kind of the individualistic tendencies, is the way to be happy. And I'm wondering how you think about this prayer as it pertains to community, feelings, goodness, etc., and happiness.
So the practice of religion, I guess at least the majority of religions, is a communal experience. Then some of the other principles there, absolutely. When you talk about honoring your mother and father, I think that you could read that to extend out to your greater family and having close family ties, and visiting the sick, caring for the bride and groom, just ways to be, neighborly, I guess. I think it's the spirit of any religion is to try to be a good person and help make the world a better place through small daily acts of kindness.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess I kind of more so meant it as more politically charged than, I guess, kind of what you're reacting to. A more concise way to put it would be that I was excited by the fact that this kind of pivotal, meant to be practiced frequently prayer kind of advocates for the type of, let's say, social positioning that is counter to kind of the more Western, individual oriented culture we're living in. So I guess what was exciting to me about it was kind of this more communitarian ethos, and how practicing the religion, it obviously makes you a part of the religious community, but the prayer isn't saying, spit on the guy who has a different religion than
you. It does not say just go care for Jews. It says care for your neighbor, care for your community. Sure.
And obviously that's something we discussed in the class, but I guess it was kind of fun to see it kind of interpreted, or fun to be able to interpret that same sentiment from this like daily prayer?
I mean, there are many kinds of happiness, right? You know, there's the happiness that you can get if you are hanging out with friends, or if you win at a game, or you know, you're on vacation. You know, that there's those kind of happiness, and I think this kind of describes a different kind of happiness, what we might call security or self-possessedness, that someone gets from being a charitable person, a good person, a person of God, and has that self-assuredness that they're doing good in the world. That could be, I think, really a source of lasting happiness.
It's interesting to think about kind of this like turn towards religion, turn towards community as kind of an answer, especially this emphasis on the community to, you know, why this stage in life might feel a little bit difficult. Like, I feel like I went through like a quarter life crisis in the last year, and I have to think that some of it has to do with just being like so focused on my own shit.
Yeah.
And just like obsessing.
Yeah, your job, the minutia in the conversations that you have.
Yeah.
Perceived slights.
Yeah.
All of that kind of bringing you down, where if you could think more outside yourself, that maybe you would be worried about different things.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to my rambling. This was fun. This was a fun little exercise, and I learned a lot. It was like, it's always interesting kind of learning about things that you theoretically already knew about. And I think one of the takeaways was that like kind of the importance of religion, at least for me, is going to be like it reminds you of the values that you hold. And that's really important, but also it kind of offers, it's like a really tremendous resource of like wisdom on all of these kind of like beliefs and values that you hold that someone else holds, but they may have like a different perspective or take on it. And that different perspective or take kind of forces you to keep an open mind to that sort of thing, and kind of forces you to look at the world in a different way. And I just think that that's really valuable. So grateful for this process.